Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another session of our Coffee and Conversation Advisor Roundtable with the Advisor Academy. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dana Saunders, and I am the Director of the Students First Office in the Division of Student Success, and also the Chair this year of the Academic Advising Council. And the coordinating the Coffee and Conversation series. It falls under other duties as assigned for me. So we've had a great series going on this year and are excited for another good session today. We're joined by Joi Bulls and other members of the MAC implementation team to learn all there is to know so far about the new general education program, which will launch in fall 2021, Minerva's academic curriculum. So I'll turn it over to Joi and to others here in just a few minutes. A couple of housekeeping things. If you haven't had an opportunity already, please be sure to sign in today. I'll be periodically putting the form where you can sign in the chat, just so we've got record of your attendance, and can also make sure that if you're not already on our advisor listserv, if you'd like to get periodic announcements or updates on events like this one, we're keeping a comprehensive log of everyone who's attended our Coffee and Conversation series so far. I'll also remind everybody that we are recording this session. So if there's something that's discussed today that you want to reference later on, or if you've got colleagues that weren't able to make it, this recording will be posted on the Advisor Academy website on the Division of Student Success. So you can be sure to reference it there as well. The last announcement that I have is that I want to share with all of you all that the selection committee for our Advising Excellence Awards met since our last Coffee and Conversation series. And I just want to publicly congratulate our 2 award recipients for the 2021 Academic Advising Excellence Awards. As a reminder, we always award 2 recipients each academic year, one honoring a faculty advisor who is primarily a faculty member, but has also a designated advising load, and also recognizing one professional advisor. And so this year's recipients are Dr. Pamela Ladrow in the College of Arts and Sciences, representing the psychology department. She's our faculty recipient, so congratulations to Dr. Ladrow. And I'd also like to recognize Sydney Stretz out of the College of Visual and Performing Arts as the recipient of our professional academic advisor excellence awards. So congrats to all of them. If you see them around campus, massed across campus, or if you see them in a Zoom meeting, please be sure to congratulate both Pam and Sydney. So I think that's everything on my end. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Joi Bulls. Again, she's the co-chair of the MAC implementation committee. And Joi, you should have screen share abilities. I'll turn it over to you.
Can you guys see my screen? No, you're not able to see my screen? Okay. I'm not used to the dual monitors. Usually I'm at home right now doing this, so let's try this again. Okay, I don't think you're still able to see it because it says resume share. Okay. Let me try this instead.
While Joi is getting that set up, I'll just remind everybody that as we get started today, so Joy's going to present some, I think, great information for us. But as you've got questions, I know there's a whole team of folks here that are ready to answer those. I'll also be monitoring questions in the chat. So feel free to unmic yourself and ask questions as we go along. Of course, there'll definitely be time for Q&A later on, but we'll be monitoring the chat as well. All right, Joi, I think you're ready. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank goodness. Okay. So I like to have our team here. You can see it's made up of some great folks across campus, from the registrar's office to accreditation assessment to the UTLC, advising, UCC, GEC. So we're made up of a lot of different folks across campus. And feel free to reach out to me Andrew Hamilton is also the other co-chair for this committee, but any of the committee members, you are welcome to reach out if you have any questions as we're going through. And and as Dana said, we have some of those folks here. So I'm just the spokes head. So, but if there's some other detailed questions, they are here to answer any of your questions. As a reminder, the Minerva's academic curriculum is 33 to 34 total credit hours because of lab. So that's that kind of 33 to 34. We are made up of our 11 competencies. Please note, this is intentional, that you don't see like C1 and C2 and that sort of thing. We are moving away from those numbers and really want to make sure that we're concentrating on the actual competency. As you know, we have some very new type of competencies, our foundations, our health and wellness. And in many ways, our diversity and equity has changed. It's not the same that it was in that diversity part because it includes that piece of equity that's in there. And so we're excited about some of these new initiatives, these new competencies, and we actually have some MAC fellows that are centered around those, which I'll introduce towards the end of this presentation. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing, I think for departments and advisors and faculty members is like, where are the courses? You know, how do we find, this is probably the biggest piece right here. So we have just, it's kind of a hot off the presses, to tell you the truth, our MAC courses. Let me go back to this slide. So our MAC approved courses, you can find them underneath mac.uncg.edu, but it's found under the course proposal process. I know it's not the best place necessarily for them, but that's where we're housing them at this particular time. If you just scroll down towards the bottom, you will be able to see. It now includes courses that have been crosswalked and courses that have been approved recently by UCC and the General Education Council. And another, I guess, note is that when we're using GEC now, we're just really talking about the General Education Council and not necessarily about the old General Education program. So when we say GEC, it's really talking about the council. So we have those courses up. Just to note, we have approximately, because we had another deadline of February the 1st, where departments were able to amend already established existing courses to receive a MAC designation. And we have about 12 courses in the queue that's being currently reviewed by UCC and GEC, and hopefully we'll see those uploaded soon. But getting back to the courses, and can you guys see the website? Making sure it's changing, thank you. So so far, these are our approved MAC courses. They will continually to be updated as we receive information. Just to let you know, every once in a while, we'll find a course that maybe is not quite appropriate, hasn't been vetted as well as it should have been in these approved courses. So you may see some changes here and there, but for the most part, these courses have been updated. You'll see that you'll be able to look for the old, so the general education program kind of reference, any type of marker that's there. You can do a search that's fairly easy to kind of put in kind of any pieces, like if you're looking for, you know, diversity and equity, you can see it comes up, anything that has those words to it. Foundations, you know, it'll do that. So it's a fairly easy way to do a search for courses. So I think that's pretty much the piece that you want to see is the MAC competency that's in this middle column. And then again, to see how the GEC, because as a reminder, the GEC and the old markers for the general education program will still continue for many of these courses until you know, students are rolled out from university. And please, Dana, feel free to stop me if there's questions in the chat as we're going through.
I will keep you updated, Joy. Thanks.
So this other piece is our timeline, especially in particular for our transfer articulation, because we know that the current students right now, they are not underneath the new general education program. They're still underneath the old. And so the question becomes, you know, students who are transferring to UNCG, what will it look like for them for their courses? And I know that's going on right now. However, in that first group, you can see for right now, courses are being updated in Banner. And again, the council approved one and the courses that have been crosswalked. So in essence, what you see on that particular, what you saw on the particular website. Towards the end of February, we should have completed all of the UCC and the GEC courses that's there, but you can see kind of in below, there may be some lingering courses that you all will have to update as time, the registrar's office will update as time allows. And then towards the end of March, that's when the registrar will update the attributes and assign those to the courses. And then by the end of April, they will be ready for advising in degree works. I actually have a mock-up. Melanie Hoover was able to give us a mock-up from the registrar's office, excuse me, so we'll be able to see that. But again, because of the number of classes, again, we had about, like I said, about 12 or so in that queue, depending on how quickly that they are approved. It may take some time for those attributes to be updated. So continue on kind of with this equivalency, the AP IB equivalency. Those courses per department have been updated. I mean, it looks the same. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell that a course is MAC or anything like that. So it, or GEC is not that particular piece. But I know certain departments, because of the changes that they were making within their department, they have removed one of the courses, or they've updated to a more appropriate course that will fit for MAC. So those have all been updated. I know that I will continue to get, or we will continue to get updates, especially as courses are going through KIM, going through the UCC, going through GEC. There might be some continual changes, but for right now, they are updated based on any type of changes to departments. So some other pieces of the transfer equivalency, we received from enrollment management, I don't know, some 800 plus courses from community colleges, from in particular NCC community colleges, but also from four-year institutions, you know, across the United States of America. And I say that because it was a lot of courses. And we did a kind of a rough kind of crosswalk, very similar process that we did for our courses here at UNCG. We kind of did a rough crosswalk for those courses. So if they are currently carrying a particular old general education marker, you know, like a GLT or GPR, then we switched over to HFA. So it was a very kind of, we try to make it as simple as possible. However, there are still some transfer courses that the committee will start to review and kind of see where they fit and if they will still get approval for those. We wanted your group and others across campus to start thinking and knowing, should I say, about some future considerations that we have going on. One is what we're calling it, and it may change names, but if hopefully you'll at least get the essence of what it is, but the competency-based learning credits, and also the integration with the competency within the major. So that competency-based learning credit, because our new general education is competency-based, there needs to be a way that students can show that they have satisfied that particular competency outside of necessarily a classroom experience. They may have some type of work experience or military experience or other things like that, that they can show that they have, that they are competent in that particular area. And so, as it says, you know, they have to show that they demonstrate that experience or that learning to satisfy it. Now we're at the very beginning stages of this. And you can see at the earliest, maybe a year and a half from now, that this would be implemented. But I think it's important to note, especially as you're seeing students, and if you're hearing students say, oh, well, I've done this, I've had this experience of doing this through X, Y, and Z. Those are kind of things to keep in mind and information that will be helpful later on as we are thinking about this. Eventually, we'll have to get some groups together, some faculty members together for these particular competencies to approve and say, yes, if this person did these types of tasks, yes, they have satisfied this particular competency. The other piece to take into kind of future consideration is the integration within the major. This was something that was always a part of, at least for the 2.0 task force, of thinking about how do we integrate the competencies within the major. Please note that this won't be the same as we have currently. So for example, how we have writing intensive within the major, speaking intensive within the major. It won't look like that. We won't have markers for class, at least at this stage, how we're talking, we won't have markers for classes in the upper division. It's more of saying, you know, hey, we can continue this. Let me back up. So students, we feel that you're not competent by taking one class in a foundational course, right? You should in order to be considered competent, you should have multiple times in kind of showing and illustrating that you have satisfied that particular competency. And i.e., that's why we get into the integration with the major. Now, I took from what you see on the slide here, I just took some pieces from our phases that you'll see on Mac UNCG, our website. And I know many of you have kind of scoured and know this, you know, a lot, and I'm joking with that, but I wanted to at least bring out some pieces of our phases that relate to our integration within the major. As you can see, our phase 3, which is still a year and a half from now, that there will be a review of upper division, our curriculum in regards to general education. And then the year after that, that's when course revisions will be due for upper division. So the question becomes for many departments of what can we do now about this? And the main thing is just to review your courses within the major and find ones that meet those particular competencies, be it information literacy or any of the critical thinking, the diversity, equity, global. Think about those particular competencies and see, okay, what are some of the classes that students are already taking within our major now that meet that competency? Of course, we would not expect for majors to be able to satisfy all 11 competencies, right? We all have our expertise within our discipline, but we're trying to find as many, find as many competencies that you feel that your department connects with the competency for MAC. So I have a Melanie Hoover, one of our committee members, provided a mock-up, and this is a blank version. Can you guys see okay? I'm kind of zooming in. So that you can see how it will look for degree works. You can see that we have our foundations, written communication. We have our areas of critical thinking and inquiry that's there, our global, diversity, and so forth. So very similar to what you're seeing right now.
Joi, we've got a question that's coming in the chat that you may punt to somebody else, so that's fine. But it's specifically about the MAC competency transfer equivalencies, and will those be updated to reflect in the notes section of tests? So the transfer equivalency search that many advisors rely on, particularly for working with newly admitted or prospective students.
As I am not familiar with tests, I will pass that on to some other, I think Melanie's on.
Hey everyone, I'll need to check with Raina, our associate registrar, to see if there's any plans to do that, and if so, when they expect to get that information out there. It's primarily what Joy's talking about are these transfer courses that don't have a UNCG course match. So they come in with like a 000 course number, but they were approved for GEC at some point. Those are a lot of the courses that she and Dr. Hamilton and others have been looking at to see how to crosswalk maybe into the MAC. But as far as tests, yeah, I'll ask some others in the office and get back to you all on that.
But, and this is Chris Partridge, even if the test record is not updated, that the attributes will be in Banner and also in degree work. So there are still tools. I mean, you might not be in tests, but there are still ways of finding out if the course has an attribute.
Does that answer?
I think that's helpful. I wrote that down as something that we can follow up on as well. I can appreciate that, particularly for students who have not yet been admitted. It would still be and for the advisors that are working with them, it would be very valuable to have that in tests, so that there's not so much sort of manual cross-referencing when and if we're able to get that done. So I'll write that down as something to follow up on. Great question.
So the other mock-up is to what it will look like in degree works. So you will see, so for an example, you'll see a little check mark here, MAC Foundation is not required, transfer student criteria. I'll get into that in a few minutes when we talk about some policies. But you can see how it's very similar to, you know, what you see now for your degree works. So, which is a great thing. Great thing. I'm pausing for any questions or anything like that.
We're looking good in the chat for right now. Thanks, Joy.
Okay. So going on to those MAC policies, the first one is in regards to the 100, 200 level courses. You know, we really believe in order for that students coming in, first time in college students, it's important for them to have some type of foundational introductory learning. And that's why it's important for us to stay true to lower division class and numbers. So our 100 to 200 level courses. With that said, there always are some, well, I should say always, there can be some exceptions to that rule. The General Education Council has developed a request to an application to ask for an exemption. Please note that by completing, always kind of spread this word, by completing the application does not mean that it's automatically approved, but it at least will be reviewed. And it really has to show and explain why this 300 level course should still be considered an introductory course, a foundational course. And so we were really trying to stay true to that 100 and 200, because how can a course be, you know, introductory, but also provide depth as well that we're expecting in upper level courses. The second policy is regards to foundation courses. This course is really intended for first time in college students. And this includes, and that's why I have that, our middle and early college. So it's not so much the credits that students are bringing in, the AP/IB credit or the middle early college credit. It's their first time actually really being a part of being a UNCG student. And so for transfer students who come from a community college or 4-year with 24 or more credits, they are not required to take the foundations course. They are welcome to if there's a space available, but they are, at this stage, they are not required to take it.
Joy, related to foundations courses, there's a good question in the chat that may be more appropriate for our representatives from the registrar's office. But for the foundations courses, will there be many courses from the community college or other 4-year courses that might transfer in as fulfilling the foundations course, or would that be something that is TBD because we'll be evaluating that on a case-by-case basis? So Chris or Melanie, you all might have thoughts on that, working with the transfer articulation team.
Yeah, I would say it's on a case-by-case basis at this point. Most of the courses we see are not 3 credit hours. So they're like 1 or 2 credit hours. Like the community college has a a college success course, but it's only 1 credit hour. So that's not going to stand in for your foundations. It needs to be 3 credit hours. So yeah, I think it's going to be on a case by case basis, but most of our transfers are going to come in with 24 more hours and it won't be required. There'll be only a very small percentage that won't have that 24-hour threshold.
And as a reminder, I always have to say the same policies apply for our students with their associate's degree. They come in, fulfilled all the general education, our MAC requirements. So this is only for those who don't come in with those credentials.
There's also a follow-up question related to degree works. And so you shared that drafted mock-up, Joy. Do we have a sense of when degree works will be updated for use, particularly as advisors and advising centers are looking ahead to working with incoming transfer students in April?
It will, from the timeline that was given to me by Chris Partridge, our registrar, that it will be available towards the mid to end of April for degree works. So one of our last, when I put MAC policies for this one is really in quotation, because it's in regards to grade replacements for course level changes. So there are certain classes that have, because of that 100 to 200 level requirement, there were quite a few of our 300 level courses that were really introductory type courses that were really 200. And so those departments have put in, and you'll see them already up on the website to change that course level. And so the question became, well, what do we do with that? How can students, if they didn't pass the course and they're looking to do a grade replacement, can they do that if the levels have changed? The great news is that UNCG, we already have a policy. We already have a procedure in place through the registrar's office. And so they have a form, an online form. So as long as the students are putting in the correct information, it will be able to be matched. So that's an already, existing policy, you might say. So here are just some policies that are under consideration that we are, as a committee, that we are continually to kind of talk through some of the nuances. So one is for courses that are no longer cross-listed. I give the example of HDF 302 and Psych 250. In fact, 302, that's one of those courses that have, that's no longer a 300 level course. And so some things have changed drastically within, it's been amended with that course. And so now, it may not relate to Psych 250. So we're thinking and talking about that particular, how to handle that process, especially in the in-between. Another policy under consideration is in regards to that change level, but more importantly, where the content has really changed as well. So the title may be the same, the number maybe has changed, but the title is very similar or is the same, but it doesn't really relate anymore to the replacement course. So we're talking and thinking that through right now.
Joy, we've got a number of comments and questions coming in through the chat. So I just want to give a chance to pause before, as those are coming in, to see what ones might be appropriate to answer as a group. So there's been several questions about the foundation's requirement, particularly involving, I think, the course that many of us are most familiar with, which is FYE 101. So there was a question from Jennifer Lepore about our existing FYE 101. And so I just want to point out that that course is currently, as of this year, a 2 credit hour course, but has already been approved by the General Education Council and the University Curriculum Committee to be a 3 credit hour course that will carry the foundation's competency. We're also seeing many foundations courses come from academic units, many of which are working with the FYE 101 team or developing their own as something that works for students in their academic schools and colleges. So more information to come on that as well. There's also a clarifying question that I think might be good to clarify for the group in case folks aren't seeing the chat. So there was a question about understanding the 24-hour rule for transfer students. And I just want to emphasize that the 24-hour rule that excludes transfer students from needing to do a foundations course is only for foundations. It's not for the entire MAC program. The existing policies at UNCG related to our articulation agreements are the only ones that would essentially allow students to go ahead and have completed their general education program at UNCG.
Thanks, Dana. So this gets into some of our advising considerations. I always say, because same policies apply, right? So especially when we're talking about catalog year, when students change their major, they change their catalog year. And that students are still able to request a change in their catalog year without a change of major. So those same policies still apply. In regards to the change of major, I know there's been some questions about when does it switch over to the new general education, when does it switch over to MAC? So any student who is changing their major between now and August the 3rd will remain on the 2020-2021 catalog year. But after that August the 3rd, that's when students, if they're changing their major, that's when it will switch to the fall, the 2021. 2022. Can't believe I feel like we're getting so far ahead, but that's where we are, catalog year. And so the question becomes, should students change their catalog year? And of course, there never is an easy answer. It's never really a yes or just a no. But I think the main thing, especially for our current freshman students, if they're looking at their major and they really haven't gotten into their major, it might be very beneficial for them to switch their catalog year to fulfill MAC, and then because they haven't really gone that much, maybe haven't taken as many classes within their major. I know that's not true for all majors. I know some, you come in, they're starting to take the major, their freshman, sophomore year. So I know that doesn't apply to all, but for many, it might be beneficial for students to switch. If they're later on, like if they're currently a sophomore, like right now, if they're a sophomore or second year, should I say, if they're a second year student, they really would have to look to see, okay, how many classes have they already taken within their major? How far advanced are they? Possible to do at some stages to do a what if analysis to see how that will change for the new general education. So there's definitely some questions to be asked, but I think it's definitely a discussion that needs to be done within the departments. And then I see chat things fly. I see the notification, so I want to pause to make sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of different topics coming in through the chat, Joy. So there was some questions about specifying the August 3rd deadline. And is that the deadline for when students should submit a major change and remain on the 2020-2021 academic catalog? Or is that when the registrar's office would be processing? And so I went ahead and clarified in the chat that any submissions received by August 3rd or on or by August 3rd. That's the cutoff for which we'll switch to the new catalog. There's quite a few questions about FYU 101 and the foundations competency that may make sense for us to wait on and loop back to at the end. So I was just kind of holding on those just a little bit.
And I think we're really about done now anyway,
right?
For my piece of it. So I did want to kind of do some updates for the Dean of Undergraduate Students office that we have established 4 faculty fellows. In particular, for this particular semester, we are working with Harriet Bailey, Jenny Dale, and Sam Harlow. For those particular competencies, we're really excited. We just met with them just yesterday, Andrew Hamilton and I, and I'll be meeting with them individually. So you'll start to hear more about especially in particular, these particular competencies, kind of their charge and what they're doing across campus. And so we're really excited about that. Frances Bottenberg from philosophy, she'll be joining us a little bit later on in April as a faculty fellow in focusing on the thematic clusters. If you've been a part of some of the circles with Andrew Hamilton, he's talked with several departments about kind of creating this synergy and energy around courses across campus that have similar focus, a similar topic, but approaches it from different angles. And getting those courses together, so she will be doing a little bit more on that work, and hopefully we'll start those thematic clusters soon, not in fall, but soon after that particular time. Also, I just wanted to give an update on the Assistant Director of Transfer Initiatives, because that applies to many of you guys here. Some of you, thank you, were met with, we had 3 individuals that came in and did a campus Zoom visit last week, and we're very excited about this process, and hopefully soon we'll have an announcement, in the next couple of weeks about a new person in that particular role, which will help with some of these things that we're talking about now. And I just have my information there.
I had a question that seems easier to speak than type. I work in athletics, and we often have new freshmen that start in the summer to get ahead and do some training prior to starting. So will they automatically be in the old GEC, and then we would have to submit a major change for them to move to the new MAC? Or if they are true new freshmen that are starting in summer, will they be able to go ahead and be in the new MAC?
I will let. From my understanding, if they're starting in the summer, they're taking that they are considered under this current catalog year. And that means that, excuse me, that you would then will have to put in for a catalog year change. That answer your, Jennifer, that answer your question?
Yep, thanks.
We've got something, I think some important processing type questions in the chat that various folks here from the implementation team might be good to answer. So there's a good question from Nancy about at what point will transfer credit hour exemptions be applied, particularly given that we know that many students bring in multiple transcripts from multiple institutions. And what will the process be if those expeditions are not applied or exceptions are not applied, but should be? So Melanie or Chris or others from the registrar's office, appreciate your perspective on that.
Sure. Hopefully, as soon as the transfer credit hits 24 hours, as soon as it's processed and they're a transfer student, it's going to check off the box. So the delay will only be in terms of getting the transfer credit processed and posted to the record.
I know the registrar's office, a whole team of folks has been working really hard behind the scenes to figure out how all this is going to technically work with regard to degree works and transfer credit and the catalog and that kind of thing. So that work remains ongoing with that timeline in place. So appreciate all the work that group is doing.
Absolutely, because we have some very grandiose ideas sometimes, and so they have to pull us down to earth of saying, okay, wait a minute now. So yeah, but they have really diligently have been working with some of these processes. So
there's also another good question. I mentioned that there are several there's an ongoing conversation related to FYE 101 and the foundation's competency. And I know there's some there's some folks from the new student transitions first year experience office that might have perspective to lend. So I'll turn it over to them here in just a minute. But a process question that I think might be helpful for us to think about is, will there be a process in place for students that might have taken FYE 101 or another course that exists at UNCG, particularly since FYE 101 has been a 2-credit-hour course. But let's say they've taken it previously, they've moved to the new catalog, now have the foundation's competency, have taken a course that now counts towards that competency, but wasn't included in our general education program previously? What kind of exemption or appeal process or process in general might be in place for them to receive credit for that competency?
I think that's a great question. And, you know, I think what's important to know is that during this transition, we are trying to, we can't say do no harm, but we are really trying to do the least harm for students. We are really working with departments. We're anticipating our work that we will do with students. And I think this will be a great question to ask for the implementation committee, kind of how to handle those particular pieces, because in essence, you know, that's what it is, the transition. They took the course that we wanted them to take in some ways. They answered some of those pieces of it. So, but that will be something that we'll definitely have to think about and talk through. And these are good, and this is why we need these questions. I think, in fact, Dana, I know we have some other questions here, but provided the link for questions about MAC. So we do receive notification when someone has asked a question, but these are things that we need to hear so that we can start being more planful as we begin the fall semester.
So maybe I just want to pause and make sure if folks that are related or connected to the FYU 101 course, if they want to say anything about sort of the ongoing questions and conversation that's going on in the chat.
Hey everybody, and Emily's here too, but she's over multiple screens, so I can't see if she's chiming in. And I want to make sure that we're answering the right questions because there were a lot flying by. So Dana, have you been able to kind of ascertain what are the top maybe 1, 2, 3 concerns or questions about FYU 101? Or do you want to just give a general overview of where we stand right now with the program?
I think that might be a great place to start. And then I'll just encourage the folks that have been having asking those questions. I think they're really helpful for the group. And so I'm drowning in chats, which is great because I think there's lots of good questions coming through, but I want to make sure I don't miss any. So please feel free to unmic and ask directly, folks.
Yeah, and I'll make it concise because there's a lot to go over today. I don't want to take up too much time. And then if there's detail, and Emily, chime in if I'm kind of missing something. FYE 101 successfully passed through the curriculum committee, then successfully passed through MAC, so we're in. We have been working with various partners on campus who are interested in offering FYE 101 for their students. So we will continue to have a relationship with SFO and exploratory students. Will all be in FYE 101. We have worked with the chemistry departments and the biology departments, and their students will be enrolled in I'm not going to get into details, but cohorted, I'm just going to say is like, it's a shortcut way to say it, but it's a little bit more than that, with chemistry students and biology students. School of Education students will be cohorted in FYE 101. The Bryan School will be taking FYE 101 cohorted. Emily, have I missed somebody?
You may have said it, or I may have just missed it, but School of Education as well.
Yeah. Yep. Right now, that's what we're working with. Right now, I'm just going to say this, our seats are, that's the number of seats we have been funded for. We have filled all of our FYE 101 seats as of today. And I think there was a question about, will there be more sections and seats? All of the seats now are currently filled based on the funding that we are receiving for FYE 101 3-credit version.
And I'll also just emphasize that I said this briefly earlier, and I don't know if Aaron or others on the General Education Council want to chime in, but the General Education Council has been seeing a number of foundational course proposals, foundations competency course proposals come forward from various departments across campus outside of the FYE 101 model that will be available to students and will be part of that competency course offerings, assuming proposals are approved by the General Education Council. So that's something that I know the implementation team continues to look closely at with regard to seat availability and supply and demand across all of our competencies. But notably the foundations competency is sort of one of the newest components of our general education program, particularly as we're comparing it to the program that we're more familiar with that we're in right now.
Yeah, so, and I just want to make a point of clarification. And with those other foundation courses coming up, if your school or area was mentioned, we have made arrangements with your folks, your deans, your whatever, for your students to take FYE 101s. So that's where they will go. And the students not in those programs I have the option to use the other foundations offerings. And I think more information should be coming to everybody from like your deans or your department, wherever that information is going to flow. But Emily and I have had meetings with all those folks. We're about this close. I think we might be done with signing the MOUs with all those areas. And then I think once those are final, they'll be getting information out to you for you to know that you will be pre-registering your students into those sections.
There is a really good question in the chat related to what sort of our course offerings are looking like across the competencies, our existing program, the GET program. Obviously has been known for sort of the breadth and depth of the number of courses that students can choose from for each general education competency. I have not looked closely, Joy, but maybe you or others have, at sort of how our number of course offerings are looking across the new competencies and sort of how much choice students will have, or will there be more limited choice?
Right. I mean, it depends on the competency, quite honestly. Some competencies, they have a lot of different choices. Others is a little bit more, it's limited, and those are growing, but it still is limited. I think about especially our fairly new ones, the health and wellness, diversity and equity, but there still are quite a few, courses. We haven't done a kind of like a seat map recently. I don't know if Andrew is on the call or not, on here or not, but that's not something we've looked at recently. But we feel like, let me say this, but we feel like obviously that we have enough courses for students to be able to take with MAC, fall semester, spring semester, and so forth.
Other questions from those of you joining us today?
I put it in the chat. I was just trying to understand the way the natural science requirement is set up. If someone has to take or is taking like Bio 105 that doesn't have a required lab, does that in fact mean they could finish all of their gen ed MAC requirements and never have to take a lab? Like, is a lab specifically required, or is that just optional if you choose a science that requires a lab?
So when looking for the CTI natural science, that's correct, because only 3 credit courses are being counted towards MAC. But typically students will get that lab piece more in that data analysis. So the CTI, they may not. Now, please note there are some departments, they're starting to change their requirements. So for an example, in order to take this particular class, they have a co-req for a lab to get both of those in. So even though you may not see a lab that's listed in the course proposal, most of those are attached to a 3 credit course already. So a student, in order to get credit for that class, they also have to have that lab as well. Does that make sense? Any of my other folks can chime in as well. I don't know if Aaron is on the call here.
Joy, I think there's some really important questions in the chat about how we're intentionally working to balance offering both our existing GEC program and MAC at the same time, and not wanting to use Nancy's words, I think freeze out was the phrasing that she used, students who are finishing out their degree program on the general education core.
And I say this
with regard to the markers, so like writing intensive, speaking intensive markers.
So those markers will still remain. I mean, especially if you think about within the major for writing intensive and speaking intensive, you know, those are classes that were being offered within the major anyway. So those markers will still remain. And additionally, if let's say a class, you know, we've had a handful of classes, they have changed, and so it may not apply necessarily to the old general education. But again, we are, you know, if we have to do substitutions for students, I'm serious about this. Like, we are really working, we are not trying to stop progression towards graduation. That is not what we're trying to do at all. And so we are willing, especially these next few years. So if we have especially if you, and I think that's what's important for this particular group, if you start seeing those patterns, because you know what your students are taking, let us know those patterns already. And so if we have to put something in place to do an automatic substitution or waiver, I don't know if I'm allowed to use the words, it's Jody, no, don't use the word substitution.
No, don't use the word waiver.
Don't use the word waiver. Okay, substitutions, okay. So we can do substitutions, you know, for those particular courses, and we can kind of do a blanket one. So again, please make note of that, you know, jot those down, contact us, and so that we can start we can work with the registrar's office to get those substitutions in place.
I wanted to mention something, just that having my ear with some of the different college departments, people are really on board with helping launch departments and who are loading their fall curriculums. Right now, that's where their minds are. They are all about the new curriculum. I do not think that there is really enough emphasis that we are still delivering the old curriculum. And so I do work, I've had 3 different departments, I'm not going to call them out in this meeting, who have asked if they need to load any markers because there are no markers left in the new gen ed. And so I think that a central message saying, you know, we're really excited about launching this new program, but keep in mind that we will be delivering the old program until students have matriculated out of it, is really important, because otherwise I think that those needed markers for students who are, you know, seniors and finishing up and don't want to switch over, are juniors where their major requirements have changed, that in the rush to adopt the new program and to secure the enrollments that they need to fund their programs, that there may be some oversight with our more advanced students.
Yeah, Nancy, I appreciate what you're saying. And in fact, Dana and I and Samantha Rayner will be meeting with the undergraduate study program directors next week, I believe, and we'll make sure that we, in our presentation, that we mention that, we not just mention, but we say that, you know, so they know that this is what their department should be doing. That general education, the old GEC or GEP, as some people, the general education program is still here. You know, we still have students, so. And we'll be doing it for a while. It's just not going to be this semester. Departments will be doing this for some time.
I think it would be helpful as department heads and undergraduate program directors are thinking about enrollments if we talk about a solid number of students. If you say there are X number of students who are following GEC, there are X number of students who will be following MAC, that might help folks understand the importance of delivering both sets of curricula.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm still trying to go through up above because I missed so many other questions. I'm still trying to catch up. So
There's some good questions about students that maybe change majors pretty late in their degree path, and so have already completed, maybe they're here now, have already completed GEC, but will change their major sometime in the future to move to the to a new catalog that has MAC as the general education program, and concern about, or just what will the process be for those students if they find themselves in a scenario where they've completed they've completed all the requirements for GEC, but have not completed all the requirements for MAC. Can you address that a little bit, Joy?
So we have talked about that as a committee, and I can't remember where we landed in regards to the registrar's office of being able to show that, but almost as if a student, when they're transferring in as, with their AA or AAS degree, we are satisfying their general education courses. So I know there were talks of doing something similar to that if their catalog year changes and they are very, very further ahead. Jody?
Hey, Joy, one other thing to note too is that we see the GEC and the MAC really having a very close overlay. We're seeing a lot of transfer from the GEC to the MAC courses. And it's highly likely that if a student has completed the GEC, they've probably completed the vast majority of the MAC, and we might have to work with them on things like health and wellness. That might be one of the ones that's kind of outlying, but something like diversity and equity, you're going to find both within the GEC and within the MAC. So I think in most cases, we'll be able to work with students who seem to have finished the GEC and move into a new catalog.
And Joy, I can speak to, oh, I just realized I didn't have my camera on this whole time. My apologies. I can speak to the process of the major minor change. And, now in current state, there really isn't a process. The students change their majors without notice to anyone on campus. And we're left to just kind of react to their decisions. And their decisions are often, as you all know, sometimes, not often, sometimes uninformed. And so we don't have a good way of preventing them from making bad choices about major minors at this time. We are building, and right now we have a project in development to use Banner workflow. Hopefully one day it'll be a Lucian workflow, but right now it's Banner workflow to get a notice sent to the department that the student is switching into in terms of major, and also a notice sent to their advisor, and that's the advisor who assigned them in Banner. So that's the only caveat. So if people are unofficial advisors or advising outside of Banner assignments, then we won't be able to capture that. But our hope is that we'll at least have eyes on these major changes at some point, because right now that means the students themselves don't even get a notice that the major assignment has been, reassignment has been completed. So I think MAC has highlighted an area where we could all be doing a better job of providing another touch point for students to get the information they need before they make a decision like that.
Joy, I think there's some important questions in the chat about timeline. Yes, I was actually first going to address questions related to adding classes to the MAC and adjusting program curricula to account for the MAC.
And what was the question about adding courses?
Am I limited to adding classes to MAC, or is there a special process? So maybe thinking about course proposals. And there was an earlier question about upper division. I'll see if I can find that one.
So in regards to courses getting the MAC attribute, it has to go through undergraduate curriculum, so go through KIM, so it's that process. Those deadlines have passed right now. So the earliest that if you're looking to get a course into MAC would be fall of 2022. But it's a good thing to start thinking with your departments, thinking now about that, because then, proposals in KIM are due that October timeline, and really to the schools is even due earlier than that. So you'll want to start thinking about that now for fall of 22 if you want courses to be included in MAC. And did you find that other question?
I think you've helped address that, but I'll ask if folks feel like there's still outstanding questions to definitely feel free to unmic and ask those, or send those again in the chat. Do you want to address the questions about timeline and course schedule and that kind of thing, particularly as we're a month away from sort of the official university-wide launch of advising and registration?
Right. So, right, you have in your notes correct, Kristen, about the end of March for the attributes to be added to, because maybe I'll let Melanie or Chris speak to this, but the attributes now, I mean, the courses are just being entered in as far as MAC and making those changes. And then the attributes will start soon with that. And because when does advising start? I mean, when does pre-registration begin? What's the date?
For our current students?
Yes, just for our current students.
Yeah,
I know that doesn't apply.
I don't know that registration windows have been officially announced, but usually
Okay.
in early April.
Yeah, and so, but I know for our, even though MAC doesn't apply to our continuing students, I know for some you might be thinking about if a student wants to switch over, how to look for that. And so we're trying to get that at least as close as possible. So during your advising time, all those attributes may not be there, but you can always refer back to this list on the website. But I always like to put a caveat. We always put a note, a caveat that, not until you see those attributes attached to that course, that's when it is finalized. So these are courses that you see on the website. They have been approved and gone through the process, but there are always those little glitches that could happen. And so, so never say to a student like, oh yeah, definitely this will be a course, it will apply, until you see the attribute there in the banner. Did I cover that correctly, Dana, when we talked about that piece of it? I think as a committee, we were saying that.
Yeah, I think so. We're still very much in the midst of the General Education Council reviewing and considering course proposals. And that will be ongoing, and then building the technical side takes time too. So it's sort of all happening simultaneously.
Right. And I always say, as we are, being flexible with departments and being flexible with students. I hope you have patience with us, as we, especially with and Dana mentioned this, folks in the registrar's office, they are really working hard to get these attributes in and courses in. And so, yeah. And and also those thanks to the Undergraduate Curriculum Committee, the General Education Council, the number of courses that they've had to review, and the time that they put into that and getting those back in, it's just been fabulous. It's really been a good teamwork for that. They have really worked overtime in getting those. And then of course, through the registrar's office. And of course, Jody's office, with this assessment accreditation with Lynn Warwick, they have really been working hard for us, for the university, so.
There's some good emphasis going on in the chat about ensuring that the advising tools are fully built and ready before registration windows open for our newly admitted transfer students who are coming in the fall, as well as our first-time freshmen. So that's something that I'll definitely take back both to the implementation team and work closely with the registrar's office on. Other questions? Concerns, logistics, we want to make sure are out on the table.
I
have a question. I'm going to do my best to try to articulate it in a way that makes sense. And if I miss the mark, just tell me. I'm thinking about students who are reapplying to UNCG as former students, and by doing such will be updated to MAC. In the interest of kind of just making sure that students have all of the information available to them to make informed decisions about whether or not they want to reapply. I'm wondering how it's being communicated to them proactively that, hey, when you reapply, just know that you're no longer going to be on GEC, you're going to be on MAC. How's that being communicated to them? Has that been a part of the conversation yet?
Joy, I know you've had some conversations with admissions about how MAC is being articulated to our new students. I don't know if that's been extended to former students or students who would be returning to the university.
Right. I haven't really had that many discussions with admissions. It's one little piece of it. But yeah, I think that's a conversation with admissions about how students are, even in the past, do they have that type of information? I think that's a kind of conversation, and we can definitely bring that to them of how are they talking about that. And I know there's always this question about the catalog year and our students is that just like the final answer where they have to be on this new catalog year? There's always this kind of discussion about it, but we have to go with the policies that are in place, right now. But yeah, so I can put that down, kind of a conversation with admissions to have to see how that is being communicated.
I can hop in real quick if that's okay, because Shannon, we actually we deal with this right now. We've actually had multiple students, maybe actually not multiple. We had a couple students this year who are back on the hour, who have come back this year. And basically what happens is the council works with admissions and the registrar's office. We pull old transcripts. We literally went back and just sort of almost a case by case, course by course. Okay, what do we think? And we sort of have to make a judgment on a case by case basis. The good news so far, it hasn't been a huge number of students, but obviously as we're moving, we're gonna have a lot of students on current GEC who may come back in the MAC. So yeah, we may have to develop some sort of policy. We haven't gone that far, but I think Joy and Dane, everyone, we're all on the same page. We don't want to ever delay a student for a technicality from graduating. But as of right now, I think the policy, the procedure will probably be just going through council, and council will probably have to make some sort of decision on that. And then it'll go to implementation committee to actually implement and go with registrar's office to actually have some sort of implementation moving forward. But I think it'll be just basically council's decision on that, if that helps. But
I know, Nancy, you had the question about community college advisors, if they are being updated. I don't know where they are with that particular piece, but I can definitely find out. I can definitely find out kind of what's the communication been for that.
Right. I'm just thinking that I know that if students earn their associate's degree, that there won't be significant changes, that the articulation agreement will cover. I'm thinking more along the lines of majors where it's important for the students to get here first, because the major level courses are being taught in the second year, and students may come prior to having earned that. And I'm wondering, the BDPs might not be reflecting, well, they're focused on the associate's degree for most parts, but I'm thinking that the community college folks who would be talking to chemistry or physics or computer science majors who might be planning on coming prior to that associate's degree, that they don't get caught off guard.
I know I've been in extensive conversations with Samantha Rayner, and I know she has had contact with community colleges, and we're in the stages of redoing the BDPs and having that reflection. So we're really doing that kind of deep dive into that. So and hopefully, especially with this new position for the assistant director for transfer initiatives, that better communication with community colleges. I know it doesn't help now, but I think as we continue with this particular piece, I think having that person in place will help with that. But I know Samantha Rayner has been, she knows, and in fact, we have meetings and there's questions that we are asking departments and I think our community college partners so that they do know that there are some changes that are happening. Any other questions? I know there's a lot of, it seems like necessarily conversations, but not necessarily questions.
I have a little bit of a question about just one of the tools that advisors and students use to find courses. I understand and can appreciate the groups, the implementations group decision to not yield to using abbreviations or acronyms. I'm just wondering how the course search is actually going to work with those longer tags, and also what's going to happen to the course display, because already with that attribute box kind of stretching out, I'm just wondering how legible and how many results we're going to be able to see at a time, and if that's something that the newer software might change, if we might, and if it does, what's the timeline for that?
So we do have smaller attribute acronyms. I think what I was mentioning that we weren't using the C1, C2 type numbers, but there are, I was trying to find, I know like Melanie has shared this list with us from the registrar's office. So we do have shorter acronyms for the attributes for each of our competencies.
Yeah, it's a shorter description, Nancy, because we can't fit all that description in Banner. So what you're going to see in the registration class search is going to be a shorter description. On the DegreeWorks, I just wrote it all out, but we can do something different there too. You know, we can shorten it there as well.
Right, but so, and also both of the descriptors or the attributes will show up. Is that right? So they're just going to be listed alphabetically. And does that mean that so I'm guessing that means all of the G's will show up in one place. Does that mean that the competencies will be split by the G's? I know that this is kind of picking hairs, but I'm just trying to think about students already fighting with sort of how the course search works and wondering kind of what we can anticipate difficulties going forward.
Yeah, I think because the descriptions now for the current gen ed start with G, they're going to be grouped. And then the MAC starts with M, so they should be kind of all grouped together. In the description, it's going to say MAC, M-A-C, to help distinguish this is the MAC course attribute versus the other course attributes. Hopefully that will help some, maybe. All of the MAC attributes are going to start with MAC, M-A-C.
What other concerns or questions?
All right, it sounds like we've at least answered the questions that we can answer for now. So I thank so much Joi and to others on the implementation committee for joining this group. I suspect that this will be the start of more, or this is a continuation of our first conversation, and there will be more conversations to come, particularly as the various advising tools become more developed and are ready for advisors and students to start to play with. I will just remind folks that if you have questions after today that today's conversation brought up, that you are more than welcome to submit those via the Minerva's Academic Curriculum website. I'll send that in the chat here in just a minute. And otherwise, just a reminder that this will be posted on the Academic Advisors Academy website if you want to go back and sort of review things that we've talked about today. Joy, I think you're also planning to share the PowerPoint and some of the other mock-ups that you shared today. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so the PowerPoint, if you click the link, is linked to for you to be able to go to the mock-up, so to a PDF.
Excellent. Perfect. So, well, thanks everyone for joining us today. I'll just remind folks that our next coffee and conversation is coming up in just a couple weeks, where we'll be talking with faculty and faculty in the mathematics department about some significant changes they've been making to the math curriculum with our Math Pathways program. So if you haven't had a chance to RSVP for that, please be on the lookout for that. But otherwise, Joy and others, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate all the information that you've been able to share.
This was great. Thank you guys so much. Thanks, Dana. I do have another question for you.